everyone. Good
Hello.
afternoon. Thanks so much for coming to our Pathfinder Friday session here on twitch.com. My name is Liz Liddell. I'm one of the designers for the Pathfinder role-playing game, and I have a guest with me today. This is Patrick Hurley, one of our editors here at Paizo. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you are and where you come from?
Sure, Liz. Thanks. Yeah, I'm an editor at Paizo. I started a few months back, but I've been playing role-playing games for years. It's my job to, well, I'm one of the people who has to read the books and check them for any errors.
That I made.
But yeah, I was about to say, she used to be an editor. There's no errors.
There are always errors.
And I'm also a science fiction writer. I've had about 24 published stories, things in Galaxy's Edge, The Drabblecast, Cosmic Roots, Eldritch Shores, several book anthologies.
And you've been doing some of the Pathfinder and Starfinder fiction on the Paizo website lately, haven't you?
Yeah, I had a Pathfinder story published in January, and I have a Starfinder flash fiction story coming out next month, which was a lot of fun to work on.
Awesome,
so,
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that we're doing fiction on our website again. It's been, we took a little hiatus from it, but we've brought it back, and I think it's just such a great way to just get little bits of the world in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe if it picks up, we'll lead to books again one day or something like that.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Well, speaking of books, we're here to talk about a book today. As many of you probably know, we are here to talk about our Gamemastery guide, which is one of our newest products. It's coming out this month. I'm seeing that some of you on the stream have your downloads already. Please be polite and refrain from spoilers for other people who haven't gotten theirs yet. And it should be available in stores in just a couple of weeks now. But we're going to talk about some of what's in this book for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet and show you how we can put some of it in action. So the section we're going to be talking about today is the Building Worlds section, which is a big hefty chunk right in the middle of this book. And that's part of the reason why I have Patrick here on the stream with me, because as someone who does a lot of fiction writing, you do world building. That's just something that you do.
Do it in the spare time. It's so much fun to just come up with those details. And sometimes you're like, it always starts with kind of a what if question, and and then you build on it from there.
You go out from there. And so I know if you haven't done world building before, if you're new to GMing, or if you're a fiction writer, if you're doing artwork, you might look at this idea of building a world and say, oh my God, a world is huge. How do I do that? And so what we've tried to do in the Gamemastery guide is put together a section for world building that helps you design and build exactly what you need for what you're doing. Now, we assume that because this book is in fact part of the Pathfinder RPG line, we do assume that you're going to run a game with it. Now, that's not necessarily the only thing you can do with it. Sure. You could use this to help you develop worlds for other projects. But we assume you're coming at it from a game master's perspective, that you're going to build this world and you're going to run some adventures there. Yeah. We're also assuming that you're building a world that isn't Galarian, because quite honestly, if you want to play in Galarian, we have a lot of
a few things. Yeah.
So this is designed for something where you're saying, wow, I really want to have a setting or an adventure that just isn't supported by the typical Pathfinder campaign setting. And so that's what this section is going to do for us. So rather than me telling you about what's in this section, we're just going to do it. Yeah. We've put Patrick in the hot seat, and we found this piece of artwork that we absolutely dig. This is a chapter opener spread from a first edition product, Pathfinder campaign setting, Distant Realms. And if you're familiar with that product, you may know that this is actually a cityscape of a city on the astral plane called Yolgamat. But if you didn't know that, you would look at this and you'd say, wow, dang, that is one good-looking city. What is going on there? And so that's the kind of awe and wonder that helps us all really get into games and explore world building in the first place. So we're going to take this picture, and Patrick, congratulations, you're a GM, and you're going to run an adventure in this world.
Oh my gosh.
Where do you even start?
Well, and this is one of my favorite things in the book is there's two differentiations for kind of how you approach world building. One is top down, where you look at it from far back, like the continent and everything else, and the other is bottom up, where you're kind of getting right in there. And for this, I kind of like the bottom up approach because it seems like it's more of like a city as opposed to a giant country. So yeah, that's where I would start. And I'd look at it, if you look at it, there's it's kind of a mix of kind of high tech and magic. You have those whimsical kind of space whales carrying crates.
Yep.
And then you also have what looks like a spaceship with rocket fuel. So to me, that kind of says it's a mix of technology and magic.
And that's something that you're, like in a typical Pathfinder game, you're not going to see a ton of.
Sure.
So like this is very likely outside of something you're going to do a lot with in our typical campaign setting. I did see a great question here on the Twitch stream. Someone asked if this art is going to appear in a second edition book. It's not. It's not in the GMG. It's we totally blatantly stole it from our own products just to use for this example. But you can go check it out. Distant Realms is still available.
Oh yes, that's quite good.
Actually, it's a really cool book that takes a look at some places outside of the actual planet of Galarian. It's looking at some interplanar locations. So, shilling our own books aside. So you're gonna go from the bottom up. You're gonna start with a small locale, and you're gonna kind of build the world out from there. This is a really, really great approach if you're a GM who doesn't have a ton of time, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna run an adventure here tomorrow, and you've got to have enough stuff to build that adventure. So when we start from the bottom up, one of the things that you said is it looks kind of like a city.
Yes.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of work backwards through this section. We're going to start with the settlements section.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that's kind of our smallest granularity at this point. And we'll build out from there. So some of the things that we think about in this city, we'll get back to some of the bigger questions like why is the city floating? That's really more of a world question. But in this city itself, we want to figure out some of the things that are going on in this city. So there's a couple places where we want to put our attention. One of them is things like marketplaces, because any settlement that you're working with in a Pathfinder game is going to be a place where your PCs are going to go to buy stuff.
Sure.
So that's something we're going to think about. And then the other thing we're going to kind of think about at this level is power structures. Sort of like the social structure of this city. What's going on there? Yeah. So which one of those sounds more exciting for you to dig into?
Ooh, I love marketplaces.
All right.
So many different cool things happen at bazaars and other stuff like that.
All right. So tell me about some of the marketplaces in this city. What's going on here?
So I imagine a marketplace here would have... They're not just going to be selling sandwiches and pieces of fruit.
Yeah, probably not.
I would think that they'd be, looking... This seems like a place that goes in between places. So it seems like not only would they be selling, normal snacks and normal supplies, but you'd have like every vendor being able to sell like an artifact, not an artifact, but magical items, magical potions. Yeah, a lot of magic items here. Yeah. So that kind of suggests that maybe this is a really magic heavy city. Yes. And so I'm going to take this back up a level and take your city up back to the world level. Does that mean that this city is special in that it is the place you get magic items in a world where that's otherwise not possible? Or is this just a very, very magic rich world across the board? So it's interesting because when I look at this city, I kind of think of it as kind of an in-between place, or a place where a lot of, like a hub of some sort, or a place where people would go. It's kind of crossroads. Yeah, a crossroads. So I think, there's a couple things when I was looking at the art. There's an episode of Doctor Who. I hope that's okay to mention as inspiration. Oh, we have inspiration from everything. And there's an episode where there's all of England is on a giant floating space whale. Now, I don't know if it kind of can look organic or technology, but to me, it seemed like it was sort of a place that had left from somewhere else and had found this place that's in between, and sort of made its living as sort of this in-between place where rare magical items are traded and sold and auctioned off or something like that. Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna put you on hold for just a second. Sure. I want to address a question that came up in chat. This is a great question. King of Rock asks if we simplified the city stat blocks, saying that they never used the law, lore, etc. stats from the first edition Gamemastery guide. Turns out neither did we. Although, wow, I did calculate a lot of them as an editor, so they're accurate, but I'm not really actually sure anyone used the accurate statistics that were in
there. And so we recognize that. We have streamlined settlement stat blocks a lot. There's a couple of traits that will tell you things about your settlement, namely alignment.
Okay.
And then a separate trait that's going to indicate how big that settlement is. And then really our goal is to provide you the information you do need. So we have information like the population, what languages are commonly spoken in the city, some of the common religions practiced in that settlement, threats and significant NPCs. And then if that settlement has anything particularly useful about it or interesting that sets it apart in a rules sense usually, then we include that as well. So in one of our example stat blocks in this book, we've got the settlement of Port Peril, which is a pirate town. And so it has a little section that talks about how you can more easily acquire things on the black market in Port Peril. But that openly displaying insignia of law enforcement agencies is likely to get
Not
you
go well.
shunned.
Yeah.
So we really have focused on the things that we know you're going to use and dropped off a lot of the extra pieces that weren't actually adding value.
I have a question about alignment for a city, actually.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If a city is a certain alignment, how often are the people in there going to be of that like alignment?
Oh, that's a great question. And in fact, something that we talk about in here. So we can put this into practice here.
Okay.
I'm going to posit a piece of information about the city that we're creating here. Let's say that this city has a lawful alignment. Ooh, actually, you said it was like a traveling nexus.
Traveling, yeah, kind of nexus caravan of.
Okay. So what do you feel like this is a place where there's a lot of laws very carefully restricting these marketplaces, or is the fact that it's traveling kind of because it's moving a little bit outside of the law and trying not to be pinned down? Or does it say, not taking sides, we're going to look the other way?
What I think, as I see it, that a place like this, an otherworldly alien place like this, would have certain laws that are just outside of what, like, you know, we would consider like don't jaywalk kind of laws.
Welcome to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. And like, I think that the only laws that they would be strictly enforced are laws that would threaten the endangerment of their environment, like that would cause the city to fall.
Oh, to crash
apart.
and burn, sure.
But everything else, like in the magic market, that would be kind of more of a not regulated.
Yeah, kind of a laissez-faire.
Yeah, as long as it's not creating an interdimensional rip in space and time, do what you want.
Do what you want. So that sounds to me pretty neutral.
Yes.
Now, is everyone who lives in this city of neutral alignment?
I mean, I don't think they would be like that. There's probably a lot of people who would be, but you know, there are people who I think would have like a bit of a pragmatic look on living in a floating city between worlds that is kind of a interdimensional crossroads for selling magic items. I think they would have overall neutral, you know, but with your normal variety of folks. Like, you know, some people a little bit more out to rip people off, other people, you know, a little bit more nice. And
sure, and maybe some folks who are in there particularly to, you know, take advantage of that laissez-faire to sell.
Oh yeah,
maybe less than slightly dubious goods.
Articles, weapons with runes that maybe aren't going to last quite as long as you think they would. Or something.
ooh. See, now as a game designer, I'm like, I can make rules for that. And you would all hate them. So what you've just described is exactly how the alignment traits in a settlement stat block work. This settlement has a neutral alignment. Because it's not pushing a particular agenda. This isn't the city at the foot of Heaven's Mountain. This is, you know, we're not in Dis in hell. It's a pretty neutral place. So this settlement's going to have a neutral alignment, but that doesn't dictate that everyone there has to be neutral. Now, in somewhere like Dis, if you're not lawful, you're probably in trouble. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily lawful.
That Dis is one of the bad places, as they say it. Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to bring our discussion.
Sure.
Well, let me touch on something else we talked about earlier. We mentioned power structures. Who's in charge of this place?
So I think in a setting like this that is very high magic but also high tech, I kind of think sometimes it's fun when you have ancient rulers who are maybe undead, maybe cybernetic, maybe the people who helped create the city or helped the city escape. In my head, I kind of think this city was like escaping from a dying world, and these great magicians all banded together, and now there's only 2 or 3 left, and they're the kind of the old ancient magisters who they don't care what they do besides selling magic items, but as long as the city and its people and their magic stays alive, this old tradition, they're the last of their world or something like that.
Yeah. All right. There's a question that you kind of answered along the way.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. This is great. This is how this process goes. It's a lot of fun. One of the things that we have a section on in the Game Mastery Guide is about world building is a section on nations. Because in most traditional fantasy settings, your settlements are going to be part of a larger geographic state of some kind. We have neatly sidestepped that problem by saying that's not the case. And I love that because that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what RPGs are so good at, that we don't have to, we don't have to have a nation because the parameters say now you must have a nation. We're like, not relevant. So we're just going to skip that section.
Well, yeah, and there could be nations or other worlds that like know of this place and this is where they go. And the other thing I thought of was that these people who live here, maybe if they go through portals to different worlds on quests to bring back a good haul of magical goods and things like that.
Right. It sounds like an adventurer's haven.
Oh, yeah. Like, if my thought was possible hooks for this would be like you stumble through it accidentally or on purpose, and then your only way to get back or pay for your next gate passage would be to acquire certain magical items for a certain vendor or transportation.
Yeah. Sort of a very different take on the dishwashing to pay for your restaurant meal approach.
Yes. Get us a magical artifact and we can let you fly out of here or something.
Right. So speaking of flying out of here, take a look at this city that we've got. And it's got these, there aren't fences. What happens if you jump off the edge?
No, and I think that was something I was thinking about. Like, how would they stop people from doing that? Would they have a border walk, or would they have some sort of magical field that prevents people from falling? And I think, when I look at this place, it seems like it's been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think its rulers care that much about the safety of its citizens.
Sure.
So while they have people who sometimes walk the edges, there's no magical...
there's no safety net.
There's no safety net.
So you can jump off.
Yes.
What happens when you do? What I'm doing now is I'm actually bringing you up a level from our bottom-up design. I'm asking you, okay, what's around this city that we have? Is this, so for one example, is this on the material plane or a material plane equivalent, or is this in like some sort of interstitial planar space?
And you know what it makes me think of? So if it was, and this is where I'd have to where someone would have to make a decision, because if it's material plane, then the amount of magical power or scientific power needed to power this city, it seems like it'd be enormous.
Sure.
Like you would maybe that's why they want magical items, because that fuels the engine.
Or maybe this is a material plane that has different rules than the ones we assume for Galarian. You're building this world. You can decide. I
know. And then there's this part of me is like, well, if it's the ethereal plane, maybe there's not as much gravity. And let's see. I like the idea that it requires tremendous magic to keep aloft. So to trade here, they tithe magical items when they come in.
Oh, right. It's a tax.
It's a tax.
Your entry fee.
And that magic, any magic you do, you're required to give them 10% of it. And that actually is what fuels the flight,
the thrusters,
the giant magic spell that keeps it aloft.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is it keeping it aloft sort of in some kind of physical world then?
Yeah, I would say it's keeping it aloft in a physical world, but one where there'd be other planets.
Okay. So this looks like it could be in space here.
Yes.
So are we in space between planets here?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that would explain why nobody is outside.
And I think Oh, and so when I see some of these ships, some of them look like they could travel long distances, but then the
crate whales.
I mean, that makes me think that there is indigenous species where gravity just doesn't matter that much.
Sure.
So maybe there are maybe this was like there's that Starfinder asteroid belt kind of.
In the diaspora sort of?
Yeah, the diaspora type of thing.
Oh, yes, it has the river going through it.
Yeah, so there's other floating structures, but not many, and this is the only one where people live, but they sometimes still use these whales and other things as transports.
Yeah. There's a great question here that came up in Twitch where Wither King is asking, and if someone used anti-magic fields, would this world just die? And I'm going to bring it back to this city because anti-magic is a thing.
Sure.
It's a spell that you can gain access to. Admittedly, it's uncommon, as well it should be. But anti-magic items could theoretically exist. What happens if someone brings something into this city?
I mean, you could make it so that anti-magic spells or items, there's maybe it's magic, so you could say that there are wards that cancel out all anti-magic spells, or you can make it like anathema, like if you bring anything that hurts a magic field, that's punishable by death.
Sure, that's one of those few things that would threaten to rip our hole in space.
And I would say that in a city like this, if it's been around, they would probably have a lot of security precautions. The place that actually keeps the island aloft, you wouldn't be able to just walk up to it and be like, well, now you're done.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm thinking a little bit about like the Starstone in the middle of Absalom Station in Starfinder's setting, that it's you can't just walk in and get to it. It's a little bit off limits. So if this is in space, is it in space within a single solar system, or is it just between stars entirely? Is this? I mean, it's got this kind of aurora look going on, like it could be in like a nebula even.
I like the idea of it being kind of in a nebula, so it's a little bit between systems is kind of how I think about it. I like the idea of in between places. That's something that's kind of
very there's a word for it, and I'm not going to remember it right now. All right, I'm going to ask a question here. This is one of the things that we encourage that's detailed in this world building section. What is the space between the stars consist of in this world? Some of the options vacuum, just like the world we live in. If you leave a planet's atmosphere, you are in nothing, or mostly nothing. But what if it were endless sky? And so this nebula is in fact just a cloud between worlds, and you could in fact take your space whales or your airship and just fly here. Are we looking at something more like the celestial spheres that the ancient Greeks modeled on the world, or sort of concentric clear spheres that everything slides around on like a sweet orrery?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question, because in some ways the orrery makes it very easy. On the other hand, though, I do like one of the rules, at least for fantasy when you're writing it, is that you want to keep things as solidly built as possible so that the magic things are believable. So if you're just sort of like, oh yeah, it's magic, it floats, blah, 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 and you keep doing that, people will kind of say, well, magic, it's weird. It's kind of an odd dichotomy, but magic more than anything sometimes needs rules. Right. Or else, you could.
And I think in this case in particular, because if this city's whole shtick is that it's this sort of magical marketplace and it's magic powered, if everything is just magic, then it becomes less special and less interesting.
So I think it needs kind of a stable reality to it. And I mean, not that this is actually a thing in physics, but I like the idea of an actual nebula with an air cloud and a breathable atmosphere. Oh, yeah.
So you could walk around outside in this, and that's why our crate whales can fly through it.
Yes. That makes it a bit more fun. And then, if by some chance like adventurers in the midst of something almost do fall off the edge or are jumping onto a space whale or something, there's no need for, how can you breathe?
Right. So it actually opens up adventuring opportunities because we have this, because we've thought about how this space around our city is working. We're going from the bottom and we're building out from there. I'm going to take it one I'm going to take it one next step. We're still dealing with sort of like the physical space around it, but we're going to go one step bigger. What's the scale of the universe? Are we looking at something that's an infinite universe?
Sure.
Are we looking at something that's specifically bounded, or are we looking at something very weird? Are we looking at some of the options presented in the book? Is it nested within multiple realities? What if, we're in sort of a Matrix-like simulation?
I am always a fan of a multiverse. I've had a few stories published with that concept. One of them was called The Parliament of Me, where a guy is confronted by all these alternate universe versions of himself because they didn't like his life choices. So I'm a big fan of a multiverse. So this is one thing in a universe, but people don't always get through physical ships or whale ships. There's also, I think, portals, places like that.
Yeah.
Places,
you mentioned gates a couple of times.
Gates, yeah.
So you have the gate tax.
You could even have it be from current worlds like Galarian.
Sure.
I would view this as just one of many slices of reality in a kind of infinite multiverse.
Infinite multiverse. Yeah. Excellent. Someone, King of Rock, mentioned that it could be a massive demiplane, and that fits exactly with what you just said. And actually is not super far off from how this is presented in Distant Realms. So I think you're cheating by having read the source material.
No, I have not. I mean,
not you. I'm sorry, King of Rock. I'm pointing at the monitor like everyone else can see.
I was told I would not look it up. I was like, no, find out later.
All right. So let's we mentioned just an offhand mention a little bit earlier. Something came up about gods. And Pathfinder as a rules system assumes divine power.
Sure.
We have several classes that are based on channeling divine power.
Sure.
In fact, another one of them coming out later this year with the Advanced Player's Guide. And so religion and the concept of gods and the concept of that divine power is a really big one in the rules set. And now, as we said at the beginning of this, we're building this because we're going to run some adventures here. So we probably better spend some time thinking about how the deities and how gods and sort of how that structure
and if they
exists. Well, and that's kind of the first question. Like, do they exist?
I think so. I think in a floating city with space whales and spaceships in the middle of a breathable nebula, that it's not too much of a stretch to say that gods exist as well.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Are we looking at one set of specific personified gods? Are we looking at several pantheons? Are we looking at vaguer gods, like so more kind of animistic deities? What are we thinking?
Well, and I hope it's not a cop-out to say I like all of those things. I think in a city like this, in a kind of in-between hub, that one of the only ways they could survive is by allowing absolute religious freedom. So any god...
Coming back to that neutral alignment aspect.
Yeah, I think multiple pantheons. I think they maybe would have, if there was any church on here, it would be deities who are devoted to travel, mercantile goods. Maybe even like if there was, you could make up a deity that's the deity of like safe travel, or like the deity that looks after lost things. And this is like the last lost city of this old world or something like that. So.
Yeah. We're not going to go super into the details of that question, but a question that this does ask is, once you sort of set those ideas for your deities, how do they function? Because if I'm going to play cleric in this game, I need to be able to pick a deity, and so I need to know things like what's that deity's alignment and what kind of domains are they gonna give. So heck, we've got time. Let's take your God of Lost Things. I think that's a pretty cool idea, and there's not a strict analog that we can pull from the book.
Yes.
So what are we thinking for the alignment of a God of Lost Things?
So. Let's see. I don't think they would be lawful.
Okay. Because they're not about returning the lost things to their owners.
No, and maybe sometimes things get found, and that's okay. But yeah, I think when something's lost, whether it's returned or not is sort of up to chance. So I think they would be I think chaotic neutral. I kind of want to say chaotic good just because I like the thought of like a deity that likes the city, but like,
sure, and it's sort of looking over the lost things a little bit.
yeah, kind of like, this is maybe in some ways the thought. I want to say the Isle of Misfit Toys, but yeah, like
the Isle of Misfit Magic Items.
Yeah, the Isle of Misfit Magic Items. And I think, like a chaotic good deity that, it's the thing where it gets all the lost socks and the books you can't find and things like.
Sure, and also your spheres of annihilation.
Your sphere, your disintegrates and
if we have this chaotic good deity of lost items, we've got an alignment, we've got an area of concern. What are this deity's edicts going to be? What are the things that if you were a champion of this deity, what would you need to do? I'm glad you picked chaotic good because we can play a champion of this deity.
I think someone like that would be someone who a god of lost things would be someone who could do two things. If people are trying to stay hidden, they would help them hide from, an evil force. Or if someone or something was lost, a champion of lost things would be like a lost loved one, something like that. They would consider it their quest to help the person find out what happened, if not return them to them.
Okay. Yeah. So that's sounding a little less like maybe a little less chaotic, and are we maybe edging towards neutral?
Yeah, maybe it isn't.
User PFred0 suggested maybe neutral good is a little closer, and what you just described, I think maybe leaning in that direction.
Now that when I say it out loud, I think you're right. Like there would be kind of rule for lost things. Yeah, if you care about lost things, maybe you do. Maybe you're not chaotic. Maybe you're more neutral. But I don't think lawful. I don't know.
I think that's fair, because I think lawful would have a lot more strict of like you must return. You must return. Yeah. You must seek out and return. And you're thinking just more like care for them and sort of shepherd them back.
Yeah.
All right. What's anathema to your deity? If I'm a cleric of this deity and I do this, what makes me lose my powers?
What would the god of lost things? I think that would be if you find something and you destroy it.
Oh, destroying a lost item.
A lost item, or not keeping a secret. Like kind of like if someone is like, "What happened to my daughter?" and you find out and you don't tell someone.
Oh yeah, so obstructing the
return.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna throw another one out. Stealing.
Oh yeah.
Creating lost items.
Creating lost items is not good. At this city, you sell things and you trade for lost items.
Right.
But you don't steal. Yeah.
Great. And so if I'm going to play a character who for whom this is my deed, if I'm a cleric or a champion of this deity, what are the allowed alignments? Well, so obviously the same alignment is always allowed, but you can have some variance.
So good. Obviously good. Neutral good. Oh, I mean, I think you could have a lawful good.
I think you could.
I think you could have a lawful good. Chaotic good also. Honestly, all three of the goods I think would be fine.
Yeah.
Because, a chaotic good person might be able to find out how to return a lost thing, and maybe they will steal it from the person who stole it. So
yeah. Yep.
So that could get complex. But yeah, any of the good alignments I think would be fine.
What do you think about lawful neutral if you're out trying to restore things to their rightful owners?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in any real life religion and there's people who interpret the faith in so many ways. So yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I would say no on evil.
That seems fair. That seems fair. I'm watching a lot of suggestions in the chat stream, and I think it's fantastic that that there's this big range of things that people are suggesting as potential
filing system.
as potential alignments for this. And I think that again kind of speaks to the power and the fun that's in this world building process, and that none of these answers are wrong. You're all right.
Yes.
For the game that you're running, those are the right answers.
Someone said the chaotic is called a liberator.
It is called a liberator. So maybe chaotic good is not a good match for this. If stealing is anathema,
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. So that's an area to think about.
Yeah.
And if that's, you can say all good for now and then maybe allow some later on, but maybe if you have a player who comes to you and says, hey, I've got this really compelling argument, I want to be a champion of the god of lost things, but I want to be lawful evil.
Sure.
But comes up with a really compelling reason for why that actually upholds the ideas that you have in mind, great, you've just collaboratively built your world a little bit more.
And made it more interesting.
Yeah. So we can go through the process of building deities for the next 300 years because you can have as many deities as you want. And it's actually, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a lot of fun to come up with pantheons and divine influences. Speaking of which, if you have not checked out the Lost Omens Gods and Magic book that just came out last month, it is gorgeous and has just oodles of information about the deities within the Galarian
and
Lost Omens setting.
Philosophies too.
And philosophy, that's true. I actually wrote the section on atheism and the non-religious philosophies, drawing from my past life here.
That was what my short fiction
oh, yes, that's right. I read that one.
The Rahadum and the Green Faith,
Yeah. Teamwork here. Good work.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. All right. So we are, we've got some good, I'm going to ask another question about your deities here. We've got some good foundations. Let's say we've got our god of small things and, X number of other deities. How active are they in this world? Are they walking around on the streets of our city? Can you bump into them in the bazaar? Are they old legends that you hardly have any doctrine about anymore? Are they embodied in some way? What are you, how present are and how active are the deities?
Well, I was when that question made me think of there's another city between and a different property where the god is made of blades and she's there all the time. And I don't think this deity would be there. I think this deity appreciates the belief it gets. I very much subscribe to the Neo-Gaiman theory of gods where food is worship is like food. And the god of lost things appreciates that I think it's a she.
I think you're feeling a she.
Yeah. That she gets a steady diet from here, but she also understands that I think it's in her nature to kind of let her clerics, unless they do something terrible, kind of operate. So she's at a distance. She's not in there doing the thing. I think, and the reason that just came to my brain was because the magic so let's say the thing that keeps this aloft, the magic, maybe it's a combination of arcane and divine magic, and her presence would actually kind of disrupt that balance. Sure. So divine magic is certainly possible, but too much of any kind of there's like a delicate balance of magic in this city is kind of how I see it. So she grants spells, but she doesn't like pop in because that might tip the city over. Metaphorically,
into the nebula. Yeah. Let's talk about some nuts and bolts for a minute.
Okay.
And I've got your back here if you need a hand.
Okay.
So there's some mechanical benefits that come with deities. One of them is a divine skill. What skill do you think our goddess would provide to her worshipers?
It might be something where it's almost like some feats that are maybe in the investigator class or something with advantages to seeking, remembering, knowing details, things like that.
Yeah, this is kind of speaking lore skills to me, which is not something that a cleric would, a deity would typically give. Typically, deities stick with the primary skills, as it were. But I feel like you could make an argument that this is that this deity would give a kind of lore. And it's your world. Maybe all of the deities, their favorite skills are lore skills instead of primary skills. That's an option that you have as a world builder.
What do you think? You know, I think that she would give certain things like healing and other things.
Oh, sure. So the divine font would be a heal.
Yeah.
Would be heal skills. How about a favored weapon?
Now that is an interesting question.
I kind of want to say net, but we don't have nets as weapons.
So if you're looking for lost things.
Ooh, actually, I'm gonna pause you for just a second. Elf Tyro in the chat just suggested society as a skill. That's probably a really good skill for this deity.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, I imagine, would be I imagine this city has a lot of factions and gossip and other things.
Oh yeah,
so
I'm
society
sure. Oh yeah, because you're getting people from so many places.
Yeah. For a weapon, geez, you know, this is a tough.
This is a tough one.
Yeah, I'm like, I think something that wouldn't damage. Well, doesn't I want to say like a billy club with a shock power or something.
Sure, like a sap or a whip.
Sap or a whip is good because you're bringing something to you.
Yeah. Indiana Jones, that thing.
Whereas like a sword or something, you know, I don't think blades. I think some sort of non-lethal weapon. Non-lethal.
Yeah. And then the other big ones that this is where you're going to crack open a rule book and take a look at some charts, but figuring out the domains and the spells that deity is going to grant.
Yeah.
Sadly,
I don't have them memorized.
I also don't have them memorized. Spoilers, game designers don't actually have everything memorized. We just know where to find all of the information we need. So you said something really interesting as we were talking about our deity here, that there's this kind of delicate balance of magic happening. And one of the questions that the world building section here mentions is figuring out that balance, that balance and that involvement of magic in the world. And we've talked about this a little bit with the fact that the city is very heavily dependent on magic. I keep thinking about this movie that came out a year or two ago where the cities are on wheels and they're rolling around and killing other cities to eat them. It was a terrible movie, but had brilliant graphics.
It was based off a YA novel too.
I think so.
Yeah,
I know. I can't remember it. I'm going to see if Twitch can help us out here.
Come on, Hive Mind.
But in the meantime, let's talk about that magic question. Things. So like across the world here, mortal engines. Thank you very much, Real Chromosis. I knew somebody would come up with it for us. We've got a big spectrum, everywhere from no magic to high magic. Pathfinder assumes kind of if that's a 4-point scale, we're kind of at a 3.
Sure.
But you could scale magic down a little bit, and that makes this world the city much more exceptional in the broader world. We could have the rest of the world be no magic and have this city be really something phenomenal. You mentioned earlier high magic feels not as much, so it would kind of decrease how special this city would be.
It would be a 2 or a 3 if it was. It would be in the middle. I think it would be a very well kept secret or a legend. On other worlds, they wouldn't really know about it. There'd be kind of old tales of the city of lost things or something like that.
Fascinating. Yeah.
You know, there's kind of like, don't leave something in your closet for too long, or it'll
end up in it'll go to the city. Are there all 4 spellcasting traditions in this world?
I think so.
I think so. We have Arcane, Divine, Occult, and Primal.
Yep.
And for those of you who don't have this memorized, that's A-okay.
I definitely think Primal, because if you look at the art, you see
we've got these trees things.
There's definitely kind of an arcology type thing to the city. Some of the buildings look very high tech, but some of the things look very organic.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a place where space whales would be flying in, or maybe they have them trained, it could be even something that along the city, they're people whose career is to keep space whales. So, you have primal magic.
For sure.
I think this would be a place that's always on the lookout for elder gods and things like that, and trying to get away from them. But they would be aware.
Hunting ground.
Yeah. There could be you could be allowed to cast occult magic, but there could be a very strong prohibition against any kind of Lovecraftian type of
anything that gets too close to the dominion of the Black or the Elder Mythos.
Yeah, like that's because that a city like this would be good food for something like that, is what I think. So,
and then it seems like arcane magic is kind of a no-brainer. That's
arcane
kind of
magic is
the food and fuel of the city.
Oh yeah, there's this great. I don't know if you've read the Discworld. You've read the Discworld books. But like one of my favorite things is when Terry Pratchett sort of used magic as kind of like nuclear power, and I sort of viewed like that's how they would view magic in some ways. There would be, I don't know, like magic repairmen, like, oh, that's the problem. Your rune here is causing a bad unstable field, and that's why your spells are shooting all over the place or something.
That's fantastic. And that speaks to giving kind of a level of flavor to the city that's not just answers on a page, but now we're starting to get into the stories and the flavor and the tone of it. What other technology is available on this world? Here's another question that this section is going to walk you through. Are we looking at where outside of magic everything is it like a Stone Age primeval technology level, or are we looking at steam and clockworks and steam like a steampunk technology level?
Sure.
Are we kind of like at the Enlightenment, Renaissance, simple firearms?
I think. Oh, is there
Pinot Graham says lasers.
Actually, I'm a rocket laser guy. Just want some sharks with frickin' laser beams on there. That dates me. I think so. What I was actually, as I was thinking, I mean, there clearly are rocket ships, at least from the art.
Yeah, there definitely are.
Now, that doesn't mean we have to include them, but I actually kind of like the idea that different technological settings can all make a birth here, but perhaps, here's an interesting, certain levels of physics or electricity maybe, and as you get closer to the city's core, high-tech stuff doesn't maybe work as much anymore.
Sure, that sheer power of magic is actually
the thaumic field disrupting
technology. So you can fly your little shuttles on to this landing dock here towards the edge of the city, but then you can't take them any further because they would just break down.
Right, exactly. And people who are perhaps cybernetic or have enhancements, they're told like only go into the first 2 rings of the city.
Warning.
Don't go in further. Dangerously high thaumic levels. And
no droids. No really.
It won't be good for and then on the outer levels, things are maybe a bit more friendly toward high tech stuff.
Yeah, and so that kind of speaks back to this this idea that got us started, which was the idea of marketplaces. And we were talking about how magic items of all kinds would be traded here, but what you just said suggested that there may also be a market for technological trade.
Sure. Yeah, I think there would be different markets. This is you couldn't call it the high tech market, but you could call it something like the electric market, or this is the magic or this is, and then there would obviously there'd be a black market and underground. I think I can't think of the population. If this was 1,000 people, I wouldn't say like, oh, there's a black market. Maybe there is, but it wouldn't be like very organized. But I would say like let's give it like tens of thousands of people.
Okay, that's a really interesting thing to think about. If this city that we're looking at is holding tens of thousands of people, that puts these little rocket ships on a very different scale. All of a sudden, those are very large ships holding a very large number of people, and these space whales just became moon-sized.
Oh, that's true.
Which is way cool. Yeah. So it makes me ask, what's in that crate?
So those crates. This is something I've gone back and forth thinking about. I think those crates are storage. Also, something maybe that they're fuel, foodstuffs, stuff that enterprising people have trained the whales to get. Maybe there are people even in them.
It's totally possible. If that rocket ship is holding a bunch of people, then that crate could hold almost like a castle.
And this is their sort of low cost way of going out into the nebula to get certain resources that they might need.
Sure. Maybe this crate is just holding very, very large magical relics. So if you've got, I'm thinking about in Arcadia on Galarian, that's the continent far to the west of the Inner Sea region. One of the nations there has this magic tree inside a mountain that's huge. It kind of powers their whole city's arcane network. It's really heckin' sweet. But if in this setting someone went and took that whole mountain, then maybe that's what's in the box.
Those are the large grade magic items. Maybe these are the things that the batter, like one of these powers the city of lost things for like a year.
Right. Yeah, it's super valuable. But it's too big to fit through the gates.
Right.
So they have to bring it in manually.
Yes. And there's certain things like a place that lost a starstone because it's in one of these.
Because it's in one of these boxes,
yeah.
Right? Maybe this is what happened to Galarian. It was taken piece by piece. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that are covered here because we have built such an unusual city that we've kind of bypassed some of the standard things that most fantasy settings have. That I want to make sure we're not leaving people in the lurch about what resources we have available for them. This section of this book absolutely talks about your basics, like what is your world? What's the shape of your world? Are you working on a sphere, or are you working on like a weird twisted toroid? What's the general environment? What are your land masses? It does have a section on mapping your world.
Sure, yeah. So
that you can give your characters a map. In this case, we'd probably provide a map of a city.
Oh, yeah.
And spoilers, actually, there is a map of this city in the in Distant Realms. If you're like, man, that city is great and I want to play on it, you can get yourself a map of Yolgamot.
Yeah.
But most of the other things that we have talked about are drawn from the sections in the Game Mastery Guide. Basically, what we've done is admittedly walked through it backwards because we're doing a bottom-up build instead of a top-down build, but used this resource that we've put together for you to build this world that feels rich, it feels interconnected, it feels exciting. There's really cool stuff going on. We're already talking about adventure hooks and ideas for stories that we could have here. I feel like, do you feel like you're equipped that if we were going to sit down and start playing tomorrow that you'd be ready to run something?
Oh, yeah. No, it feels, and I think that's one of what you said about hooks. I think that's why I like it, because there is kind of a neat little hook or a unique thing. And what I love about the tools in that book is, this is a very fantastic setting, but because you could look at all the questions and answer those, it's built on very sturdy foundation. And I think when you're making up a world, the pretty things, the icing on the cake, is supported by all of these very good logistical questions about land masses, physics, deities, gods, things like that.
All of the components that are mechanically kind of needed to make a world work. Yeah. But obviously, we're not limited to just, is your city full of castles or is it full of, wooden buildings? We're able to take it and build this sort of semi-futuristic, hyper-fantastic city of lost spaces.
Yeah.
That quite frankly sounds like a lot of fun, and maybe. I don't know. Maybe we can convince some of the blog folks to let us write a flash fiction about it.
Well, no, what do you do?
We've got a question here from River Ray of what can we expect on the next week's stream? And I'm going to have our wonderful helper Peyton type in an answer for us because I don't actually know. We are deep in development on a product coming out later this year, and I have not really come up for air much. But if anybody else has any questions about the Game Mastery Guide, we've got just a couple minutes here before we wrap up. While you get your fingers typing on the keyboards, I want to say, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me on this stream. It was
a blast.
It's super fun to get to build this world with you.
Oh, thanks. It was awesome. Thank you for the book and for asking me to join.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a question here from ShanWolf01. Asks if we are getting guns at any point, and I made a wild guess from the many comments about guns upstream. So we're talking about the technology level of this world. That we there are conversations happening about the fact that there are not guns in the second edition of Pathfinder yet, and that's something that we do very much want to see. We're working to find out how to do that in a way that works well with the mechanical ecosystem of the game, and also when in the setting. so that it feels consistent from first edition, but works with the mechanics of second edition. So that's a conversation that we're having.
Oh, cool.
I can't specify anything because nothing's been approved yet, but we're talking about it.
One of my favorite
with
series is the Dark Tower, Stephen King's Gunslinger.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Any new subclasses in Pathfinder Second Edition? Subclasses are not a concept that moved forward with us from First Edition, but what we do have is in the Advanced Player's Guide, which is coming out in July of this year. There are going to be over 40 new archetypes.
Yes.
That you can apply to any class to build exactly the character that you want.
That's one of the things I actually was editing some of the archetype sections, and that's what I loved about it was that you could actually literally create any combination from that. It was...
River Ray asks, what's the toughest part of developing the Game Mastery Guide? The toughest part, honestly, of developing the Game Mastery Guide is in some ways just logistics, and that because of the place it landed in our production schedule and some staffing changes that were happening in the design team, it was a transitionary product.
Okay.
And so Stephen Radney McFarland left the design team early in the development of this book, and I came in late in the development of this book, and you'll notice that there was a lot of middle, which the design team was down a person. So it was a heavy lift, particularly on Mark and Logan, the two primary authors on the Game Mastery Guide. They did fantastic work. I came in and sort of helped roll it over the finish line, but it was tricky.
I bet.
So props to the team for making that happen. Best NPCs for low magic settings. There is a book coming out later this year that you're going to freaking love. It's called Lost Omens Legends. You should totally check it out.
It's awesome.
What other good questions do we have here? Are the rules for designing magic items in the Game Mastery Guide and artifacts? That's from Gustavo Malek. And yes, the Game Mastery Guide has rules for designing magic items. It has rules for designing artifacts. It has rules for designing a new special class of items called relics that grow with your character. They gain more abilities as you as a character gain more power. They're way cool. And all of that is in here. So that's those tools. We're going to put them in your hand so that you can work with them.
That must be an interesting thinking about it because you're having people use their imagination, but you're having them try to tell them how to do it in a structured way.
That's exactly right. Within the mechanical framework of the game, the beginning of the section is figure out your concept first, and then here's how to fit the mechanics to that. So I think you'll find that really helpful. Spamotron, that's a name there, asks, are the tech levels we mentioned earlier just a visual skin, or is there advice on how they can affect mechanics? There is some advice in this book on how to adjust mechanics for different technology levels. Part of the challenge for that is that because Second Edition doesn't have rules for technological items as a whole yet, we can't really point you at use these items instead. So to some degree, it's going to be some visual skinning. We do have some advice in the book on how to scale the power level of the games to suit different settings and different contexts. So between the two of them, you'll get really close, but I don't have rules for laser guns for you yet. I'm sorry.
Yet.
What are item quirks? That's from Kitsune Warlock. Item quirks are a section in the Game Mastery Guide related to building magic items that let you customize magic items to do something special and unique and quirky that is going to be just for your item. There's a whole 2-page spread of quirks that you can choose or you can determine randomly so that you can have your staff of eyes that occasionally also opens a mouth and starts talking to you, or your cloak that comments on the rest of your fashion.
I mean, I do think that it's important when you create an item like that. It shouldn't just be your be all and end all. There should always be a cost or a price or a power or a weakness or something.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find some actual quirks here. It's we're just going to go to that page. There, I got the book in front of me. We might as well look at it. All right. This item is hungry. It needs daily meals, often odd things like wood shavings.
I love that.
Or the tracing item, which is followed by thin trails of color.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Ooh, What's our favorite art piece in the Game Mastery Guide? That's from River Ray again. I love one of the chapter openers. I think it's for the variant rules section. I'm going to check. That's a picture of Ezrin, our iconic wizard. He's walking down this hallway looking at this wall of portraits. And there's 9 portraits. And each portrait is Ezrin in a different role. So we have like Asmodean Tiefling Ezrin, and we have Ezrin the Knight, and then we have Ezrin the Half-Orc. And it's just really, it's a lot of fun. It kind of gets you thinking like, oh wow, what are the possibilities? It's a really creative and fun piece of artwork.
Yeah, kind of meta in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. It's for the variant rules chapter, so it's kind of appropriate.
Awesome.
We've got from Ashamantalu asks if the PDF is available already or only hardcover pre-orders. It is only subscribers who I think, and not necessarily all subscribers who have the PDFs, but they're starting to go out. So they should be in your hands very soon. And wow, oh my goodness, we have run up against time.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. I want to say thank you to everyone on our Twitch stream for following us today. You guys have been a fantastic audience. It's been a lot of fun to build this world with you and have your input into it. Gustav Malek, yes, there are new poisons and drugs in the book. I happen to know because I wrote them. Patrick, thank you again so much for being on the stream. Peyton, thank you for running all of our technical stuff in the background. He's giving me thumbs up over there. You all have a great afternoon and a great weekend. We'll see you around next week.
Thanks.